What's up, guys? Welcome to this edition of a Funko Podcast. I'm DK Wrestler.
And I'm MD Shady.
And in today's podcast, we are talking the greatest movie franchises of all time. This is an idea that was inspired by some K-Dog and Fish podcasts that had trilogies and movies with sequels. And I've been waiting for them to do a greatest movie franchise of all time, but they haven't had a podcast since like last summer. Decent idea for a podcast, and I want to define what we mean by franchise is that they must have 4 or more movies to be considered a franchise. Otherwise, if it's 3, it's a trilogy. If it's 2, well, then it's a movie with a sequel. But we do have some honorable mentions first. So first off is Back to the Future, which isn't a franchise, it's a trilogy. There's only 3 movies. Lord of the Rings, also a trilogy, although would be a franchise if you also include The Hobbit. Terminator is a franchise, but I think I've only seen the first 3 movies, and I think a lot of people only talk about the first 3. Then there's also horror, like I didn't want to mention about those, like Halloween, Friday the 13th, Jaws, etc., considering there's just so many movies to go through. Mission Impossible is another one that people like, but we won't be mentioning. There's a lot of those movies, and I think I've only seen the first one, and that goes with also Jurassic Park has a lot of movies as terms to Jurassic Park, Jurassic World, and then there's the Dominion movie, but I think I can only say that I've only seen the first one. Any franchises that I missed on that honorable mentions there, MD, that you think of off the top of your head that isn't going to be on this?
Not really off the top of my head, obviously, like you said, with like Lord of the Rings, Hobbit. But besides that, yeah, I don't know. I think we got pretty good coverage with this one today.
We're going to be talking about 10 franchises, and then we're also going to be ranking them once we talk about our opinions of them. So, first franchise we're going to be talking about, we couldn't start off any better than what we have here for the first one, something that both MD and I really enjoy. That's Toy Story, of course, with the first movie releasing in 1995, the second movie releasing in 1999, the third movie releasing in 2010, and then the fourth movie coming out in 2019. So, only a few, like 5 years ago, making it a franchise officially. What a fantastic franchise. I can't really say any bad things about the Toy Story franchise as a whole. It's funny because we did a Toy Story podcast a few years ago on the channel, and we talked about, after talking about number 4, like what could there be after 4? Like, is this the end of Toy Story? Will there be, we were thinking, could there be a spin-off? Will there be a 5th film? I mentioned about how it should be done after the 4th film and that they do a spin-off. And then MD mentioned how he thought there was going to be a 5th film, which we actually both ended up being right in that case, because Lightyear came out in 2022, wasn't all that great. I mean, it was all right, but like it doesn't live up to Toy Story. And they announced recently there's going to be a Toy Story 5, and only a few weeks ago they confirmed it's coming out in 2026. So I only have to wait 2 years for that to come out instead of waiting the usual like almost 10-year gap it usually takes for a Toy Story movie to release.
Yeah, so first things first, I wasn't sure if you heard about the announcement for Toy Story 5, which is awesome. I really hope they can do a good job of this movie and kind of bring it all together and kind of finish it off, at least for the main storyline. But Toy Story, yeah, I mean, it's been in my life, my whole life, and I love the hell out of Toy Story. It's bring me so much joy as a kid, and then also ripped my heart out of my chest a couple of times. I love it. I mean, I love collecting Toy Story stuff. Love the movies. They are essentially perfect films. The 4th one, obviously, there's some decisions that were made that I don't necessarily agree with, nor really disagree with, I guess. So yeah, Toy Story is just awesome. I love it so much and really can't get enough of it.
So I guess this is where we start off our first rankings for this podcast, which will go from least favorite to favorite. For me, it would probably go 4, 3, 2, and then 1 as my favorite. Number 1 has just so much nostalgia, especially that beginning intro with You've Got a Friend in Me and just that whole sequence. Like the first computer animated movie pretty much set the bar for Pixar, because I don't think there's ever going to be a movie that will top off that first Toy Story movie. Some people, and I know I'm pretty sure that's how it's going to be for MD, will probably put number 2 over number 1, which I wouldn't disagree with that, because they're about, when it comes to the ranking of these movies, it's like Toy Story 1 and 2 are one of the, and there's going to be a couple of franchise we talk about actually on this podcast where number 1 and 2 are kind of like very similar to the fact of you could literally switch it up. Like it will be like depending on the day, it's like, oh, I think two is better than one. But just nostalgia purpose, I think number one, number three, realistically should have ended the entire, well, it wouldn't be franchise in that case, it'd be the entire trilogy. Honestly, from what I've heard of theories for number five, if number five is the theory that I've been thinking of, I think it actually could surpass number four.
Interested to hear what that theory is, but my ranking on them from least favorite to my favorite would have to be 4, 3, 1, and 2. You nailed it. Number one really does feel like that movie. It is so good, and it really just has that nostalgic feel of this is Toy Story. But I feel like I probably also watched them in succession. I probably watched number one and then number two, like on the same day on the first time I ever viewed Toy Story, given my age, obviously. And Toy Story 2 is one of my favorite films of all time. So I have to put that as my favorite.
So the next franchise we're going to be looking at is Indiana Jones. Very popular franchise. Harrison Ford, who is known huge for Star Wars, directly after Return of the Jedi did Indiana Jones. Movie number one, it's Raiders of the Lost Ark, released in 1984. Temple of Doom, released in 1986. Last Crusade in 1989, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull in 2008, and then the most recent movie, the fifth movie, is The Dial of Destiny, released last year in 2023. Yeah, pretty fun and adventurous franchise that is Indiana Jones. I mean, that first movie, it just kind of set the tone of what like an adventure action-packed movie should be like for the most part. Do I think that they should have made a fourth and fifth? Not necessarily. I think the reason they made the fifth movie was because a lot of people didn't really like that fourth movie. And I actually have not seen The Dial of Destiny yet, besides a couple of clips.
Yeah, I mean, super iconic. Harrison Ford is a goat. He is awesome. And then to talk about that fourth movie, yeah, that fourth movie was ridiculous. A lot of people do hate it, which is understandable with the whole, like, there's aliens. And the new one I have not seen, so I don't even know the premise of that one, I don't think.
So when it comes to ranking of the films, yeah, so it was a little bit weird to add Dial of Destiny here since I haven't seen it, but I kind of base it off of like what a lot of movie critics and like people on YouTube have been like talking about for the movie per se. So at number five, I put as Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and then number four being Dial of Destiny, because I heard like the movie was good for like two-thirds of it, and then like the last part is kind of what like kind of like how I feel maybe like the light. That's my perfect example, I guess, because we just talked about the Lightyear movie. How for like two-thirds of the movie it was like fantastic, it was awesome, but then like it was like the end and like that plot twist that just kind of threw it off for me and a lot of people. And I think that's what I heard a lot about Dial of Destiny, but people liking it more than Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. I would say now three would be number three, Last Crusade. That was still a pretty decent movie, adding Sean Connery playing as Indy's dad. Number two for me is Raiders of the Lost Ark, and the number one is Temple of Doom. I recently rewatched the series. I really liked Temple of Doom and how dark it went, which is why I think it's my favorite.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking the same thing when it came down to those last two movies. So I think I'm going to agree completely with you on this one. My ranking is the exact same as yours.
So now the next franchise we're going to be talking about is Fast and the Furious. It is one of the bigger franchises, so it has to be in that discussion of the greatest movie franchises. So of course there was The Fast and the Furious, released in 2001, Too Fast, Too Furious, released in 2003, Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift, released in 2006, Fast and Furious, released in 2009, Fast 5, released in 2011, Fast and Furious 6, released in 2013, Furious 7, released in 2015, Fate of the Furious, released in 2017, Fast 9 released in 2021, and then last year in 2023 was Fast X, or Fast 10. Obviously, that's where they were going with. The only movie we aren't mentioning is the Hobbs and Shaw movie, because it is a spin-off and not like really in the franchise. But when I was watching a lot of ranking videos, people were mentioning about that, and actually would mention that in like the higher part of a ranking list realistically. But Fast and the Furious. So growing up watching Fast and the Furious, really awesome. Love the whole street racing aspect and the car culture aspect of the movie. A little bit of action, which was cool. But something about the series where I have a major love-hate relationship with it, because I loved those earlier films and didn't really like the direction they went to by making it almost a full-on action movie and not really focusing on the cars. So for the most part, I have only seen, I think, up to seven. And then I just, by choice, have not watch the other ones, especially because of Paul Walker's passing. I've always been a fan of Paul Walker rather than Vin Diesel. I kind of find him to be very overrated in my opinion. I know some people did enjoy the direction of going into the action movies, and I mean this movie series keeps making billions of dollars, so like they just never really know when to end it. They're actually filming an 11th movie, which is kind of ridiculous. I think they should have ended it on 7.
Yeah, I definitely feel the same way. I really have not seen many of them. I believe I've seen two of the movies in their entirety, maybe three. But I definitely agree that the way that they went is ridiculous. Like, I feel like the newest Fast and Furious is like John Cena hops out of a plane riding a Raptor that is also riding a motorcycle. And that's the Fast and the Furious now. So yeah, I definitely did enjoy the few movies that I watched. I definitely need to watch them all. I like them. People love them. Obviously, it's a huge, huge franchise. And yeah, I kind of agree that it would have been a perfect ending at 7.
Ranking these, so this was kind of difficult for at least like the bottom half, right at the bottom of here, and I'm basing mostly off of like people's opinions for the bottom part of this list. Fast 9, and especially because one joke I made after I seen Fast and the Furious take this direction is like, oh, well, by the time they make it to number 15, it's just going to be cars in space. They actually had a clip in number 9 where they drove a car in space and thought it was so dumb. I was like, what the hell? And then especially like trying to believe that John Cena is Vin Diesel's brother. Then Fate of the Furious, Fast 10, Fast and Furious. Then number 6 would be Fast and the Furious 6. Then I put Tokyo Drift in number 5. A lot of people put it near the bottom because of the fact that there's no Paul Walker and Vin Diesel in it, but I loved the way that that movie was. It was based in Japan. You had this really cool, like, if you remember, there's this one song that plays in the movie.
That would.
That I think so. I think that's it. But like, yeah, you if you know the song, you know the song. Like it's a song that you could probably work out to at the gym, not gonna lie. And it's just like then I put Too Fast, Too Furious, which normally people put at the bottom of the list. I enjoyed the hell of it. There's something about that movie that I remember more about that than I remember about pretty much any of the movies. I loved Brian's car in the movie. Then I put at number 3 Furious 7 just because it's got that ending with Paul Walker. You also have Jason Statham as the villain, and Jason Statham was really awesome in this movie. I mean, I guess awesome enough that he got his own side movie with The Rock. Then at number 2, I had to put as The Fast and the Furious, the very first movie that set the tone. And then I put, because this is literally every single person I've watched videos on would put Fast 5 as the number 1 movie out of all of them.
Yeah, my ranking, I don't really know because I haven't seen so many of them. I feel like, yeah, I've seen 5, I've seen 1, I've seen Tokyo Drift. So maybe I'll just rank those ones.
Yeah, that's fine. If you just do like top 5, that's all right.
Yeah, I love Tokyo Drift, honestly. I really do. So I think I'd probably put Tokyo Drift as my favorite. I guess the first movie would be my second, and then 5 would be number 3 on my list, I guess.
All right, so the next franchise we're going to be talking about is the Batman franchise. And more specifically, we're talking about the 4 movies that were made 2 and 2 each from Tim Burton and Joel Schumacher. So starting off with Batman in 1989, Batman Returns in 1992, Batman Forever in 1995, and Batman and Robin in 1997. So this specific era, I felt started off strong and ended off not really the greatest. I think it kind of got revived for when we talk about the Dark Knight trilogy, which isn't featured because I feel like if I had to feature that, then I got to feature like the Batman from 2022, and I haven't seen that movie yet, so I don't want to like put an opinion on that realistically. The only thing I can remember about a lot of Batman films is by the villain. Like I know like in 89 it's Joker, in Returns it's Penguin and Catwoman, Forever I believe was Two-Face and Riddler, and then Batman and Robin I will forever remember as Arnold Schwarzenegger as Mr. Freeze, and that kind of stands out. I don't know. I always felt Warner Brothers fell flat with DC. A lot of the Batman movies, including the Dark Knight trilogy, I should mention, Like they always hire different actors, so it was never the same actor for the most part, which Marvel usually kind of stuck to the same one playing a character.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that, though. I do like Batman. I think he's good, and especially in some of these movies. But I do really feel like the same way as you with the whole villain thing. Like you kind of think about the villain when it comes to these Batman movies. You don't really think of like how was Batman in this movie, but Batman and Robin definitely love that movie. Arnold Schwarzenegger as Mr. Freeze was hilarious, just so funny. I know that movie gets a lot of hate, but I it has a soft spot in my heart, and I believe it's the same thing with you.
Yeah, when it comes to the ranking, though, I kind of went with the ranking of what everyone talks about, which is 4-3-2-1 again. Just because even though I have not seen, yeah, Batman and Robin does have a soft spot because I love Arnold Schwarzenegger and that, and there's a lot of like corny scenes there, but I feel like it's a movie. I remember enjoying it so much as a kid that if I rewatch it again, I feel like I'm gonna be let down so much and thought, wow, I now see how people think this is arguably like the worst live action Batman movie of all time with Batman and Robin. And if we were talking about the Dark Knight trilogy, honestly, those would probably go above all four of these movies realistically, especially The Dark Knight from 2008. Like that's it's the best Batman movie ever, and nothing's ever going to top it.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right about that last point. So I guess with my ranking list, I feel like I'm gonna do two, three, four, one. I feel like I like that. I really like the Batman and Robin movie. But it is like you said, like I could probably go back and watch that and be like, oh yeah, this does suck. Just because obviously we critique movies and things that we watch differently now as we age. And of course, the 89 Batman movie is a classic. And then, like you said, if we were adding the Dark Knight into this, I definitely think that they would top the list because they are amazing, amazing movies.
Next franchise is the Thor franchise. There is four movies in the MCU of Thor, so it officially became a franchise as of 2022 with actually what seemed like to be in the like end credit scene, a fifth movie potentially coming out, it seems like. So starting off, first movie was Thor in 2011, Thor the Dark World in 2013, Thor Ragnarok in 2017, and Thor Love and Thunder, the most recent Thor movie in 2022. Thor was all right. I mean, he's not up there with like a Captain America. He's not up there with like Iron Man per se, maybe even the Hulk, but Thor is Thor. Like he's not too bad. Like if I'm rewatching like certain MCU movies, I don't think I would like really go back and watch the Thor movies, but for the most part, it was all right. Like, do I think that there should be like a fifth film? No. Do I think there even should have been a fourth film? Not exactly.
So I've only seen the first two movies. I have not seen Ragnarok and I have not seen Love and Thunder. Though I've heard good things about Love and Thunder mostly. Ragnarok, I feel like I also heard good things about. But the first movie I really enjoyed. The second movie, I don't even remember the second movie, but I know that I watched it. Not one of my favorite franchises, not even one of my favorite superheroes.
So, ranking these films, since I have seen all four of these, right at the bottom at number four is the second movie, The Dark World. Oh my God. Yeah. And it's a good thing that you forgot about because it's that terrible that you should forget about it because it's not that good. Then I put at number three, Love and Thunder. It was one of those movies where it seemed like it had a lot of hype and then it just kind of fell flat. The only thing that saved Love and Thunder was pretty much the entire movie's track was Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction. Then number two would be the original Thor movie from 2011. Pretty decent way to bring up an origin story. And then Ragnarok is the absolute best. The comedy bits are right on point, and it was so well done. Like it should have been over after the third. Once you watch the third movie, MD, you will realize my opinion and how Ragnarok is just so superior to all of the other Thor films.
All right, then I'm going to have to agree with your decision then. I definitely have to watch Ragnarok.
All right, so the next franchise we're going to be talking about is the Avengers franchise. So there was four movies in the franchise. We got Avengers in 2012, Age of Ultron in 2015, Infinity War in 2018, and then Endgame in 2019. A very fantastic franchise compared to Thor in the MCU. I mean, with the Avengers, you have multiple characters like Thor, Hulk, Iron Man, Captain America, Hawkeye, Black Widow. There's just so much, especially when you get into like Infinity War and Endgame, where you pretty much have all the characters in the MCU participating in those movies at that point. It's so difficult to like do a ranking because all of them are so great in their own way. Besides one film, I'll mention one film does deserve to be on the bottom, but there's just a fantastic set. And arguably, like if you did a top 10 list of all MCU films, a lot of people would probably have at least 3 out of 4 of these films in their top 10 list. It's just that great of a franchise of movies.
Yeah, I think you pretty much nailed that one. It really is. And I think it is because, of course, you're bringing all of these characters together and seeing them all on one screen, which is awesome. So, yeah, this is definitely going to be a hard one to rank because now that I've seen all of the movies, took
Wow,
me
you actually
forever.
seen Endgame finally?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh
Uh,
my. So, in case anyone was wondering, it's been an ongoing joke as terms to the channel and the podcast that MD had not seen Endgame, and it's been since 2019. So now 5 years it took you. All right, let's give a round of applause. I'll add some editing notes right there. Round of applause for MD Shady finally watching Endgame. But I didn't know if you had anything else to say. I just cut you off there.
yeah, I basically it's gonna be a hard one to rank because I feel like it really just all is one big story, honestly. It's a lot different than some of these other franchises, especially like Fast and the Furious, where those are just kind of sets of movies that go together, or the Batman movies. It's the same thing. But with Avengers, it was one progressive story.
For the ranking, starting off right at the bottom at number 4 is Avengers Age of Ultron from 2015. That one kind of fell flat from the cusp of the first Avengers movie. Going from 3 to 1 is super difficult because all 3 of these films are fantastic between OG Avengers, Infinity War, and Endgame. So number 3 is Endgame, and number 2 is Infinity War, with number 1 being OG Avengers. I put Infinity War over Endgame because, especially after rewatching these films, put my mindset to as if I had watched these for the first time and that I didn't hear about news about, oh, they're making another Avengers movie or whatever. The fact that, like, with Endgame, there's so much that happened, there's so many moments, and you knew that it was going to end off on a good note. But when you watched Infinity War, you didn't know that the bad guy was going to be on top. And that's something I always loved about Infinity War because there's not a lot of movies that they decide, let's have the bad guy go on top. Yeah, it's probably going to result in another movie, but you weren't really expecting Thanos to just be on top there. You probably thought Avengers, they were going to take out another villain. They didn't necessarily. They had to take another movie like Endgame with a lot of great moments, like I mentioned, to take out Thanos. So that was why I think Infinity War is better than Endgame because of that little plot twist. But they are once again like Toy Story 1 and 2, kind of equal and they could be interchangeable. And then OG Avengers is my all-time favorite MCU movie, so that's why it's right at the top. It just set the tone to how the MCU was going to be for the most part. I know once we got into like phase 4 and 5, they kind of fell flat because we ended off on such a huge story with Endgame. But yeah, we'll see how the MCU goes, especially, and that's something I forgot to mention while listing off the movies. There are going to be 2 more Avengers movies. One is Secret Wars, and then the other one, I don't know the official name because originally it was the Kang Dynasty, but the actor Jonathan Mayers got kicked out of the MCU for some controversy. So they're going to have to switch up, like, if Kang's still going to be the villain, but by a different actor or just a different villain overall. But yeah, there's 2 more Avengers movies, making it 6 movies. And I don't know how they would rank as terms of these ones. Maybe it'd be better than Age of Ultron, but I'm pretty dead set. So Age of Ultron, Endgame, Infinity War, then OG Avengers.
I think my ranking would start from the bottom being Age of Ultron as well. Reason for that is I felt like when I watched it for the first time, I just found myself like checking my phone so often. I was just bored of the movie. I feel like it took a while to pick up. I think it might have been the reason. But yeah, I just felt like I was so bored while watching that movie. Then I would also put Endgame, then Infinity War, then number 1. So the exact same, and pretty much for the same reason with the whole having Infinity War over Endgame, because one, the movie was amazing. But then again, yeah, you see the villain on top at the end of the movie, which is a weird twist. And I remember when the movie came out, like literally watching people in the mall coming out of the movie theater crying, just like, whoa, what happened in this movie? And then finally watching it a couple of years back, I was like, oh, okay, I understand now why people were just going nuts leaving the movie theater. And then the OG has to be number 1. That's the one that I've seen multiple times over. So for that reason, I feel like it has to be number 1 for me.
All right, so the next franchise we have here is the Spider-Man franchise. Now, in a way, I will admit, I kind of am cheating because within this franchise, there are multiple trilogies and then a set of films that doesn't have a third movie. But we thought just to add as a franchise, it would be Spider Man, since this will be one that both MD and I will be able to talk about thoroughly. The first movie, starting off with what would be the Tobey Maguire trilogy of movies: Spider Man, released in 2002, Spider Man 2, released in 2004, and Spider Man 3, released in 2007. Then we have the Andrew Garfield set of movies: Amazing Spider Man, released in 2012, and then Amazing Spider Man 2, released in 2014. And then the Tom Holland set of Spider Man movies: Homecoming, released in 2017. Far From Home, released in 2019, and then No Way Home, released in 2021, with there being supposedly another Tom Holland Spider Man movie coming down the pipeline, unknown of when that will be released. But Spider Man as a whole, Spider Man's awesome. I mean, when you compare his strengths and all that to other superheroes, he seems kind of weak, but realistically, Spider Man is the face of Marvel. Like, whenever a little kid thinks of Marvel, they're most likely thinking of Spider Man. And I don't know, I guess maybe he's become popular because he's so relatable. When you have the character of Peter Parker, he gets bullied in school, and then all of a sudden he gets these spider powers, and then the endless different villains that he's had were really awesome, like Green Goblin, Doc Ock, Vulture. There's a lot of cool villains that Spider-Man's had. Venom. I just keep going. But yeah, when it comes to Spider-Man films, there are some hits and there are some misses. People always like to argue, talking about like who is the better Spider-Man, and it depends on what do you look for in a Spider-Man. Do you look for the actual Spider-Man character? Do you look for Peter Parker, or do you look for both? Because I can argue for all of those that Tobey Maguire is a great Peter Parker, but not that great of a Spider-Man. Andrew Garfield is a great Spider-Man, but not that great of a Peter Parker. And then that's why I feel like a lot of people like to say about Tom Holland being maybe the better of the three, because he can play both of them pretty well. So yeah, Spider-Man, I always love enjoying those movies, whether it is Tobey Maguire or Andrew Garfield or Tom Holland. They just pretty much for the most part knock it out of the park, and I always enjoy for when the next Spider-Man movie releases.
Yeah, Spider-Man is amazing. No pun intended. Yeah, Spider-Man is my favorite superhero, and I feel like a lot of people also agree with that, where their favorite superhero is Spider-Man. When it comes to who's my favorite of the three, it's a tough one. Obviously, growing up, Tobey Maguire was Spider-Man. That was the Spider-Man. But I honestly do feel like Tom Holland is the best Spider-Man. He's got the youngest look to like the age that Peter Parker technically is, and he's a hell of an actor, and those movies are so good. I mean, all of the Spider-Man movies in my opinion are good, and I feel like I've seen, besides Homecoming, I think like almost every Spider-Man movie I've seen in theaters. No Way Home, where tying all three of them together was just an amazing moment for the Spider-Man franchise, and I hope that we get to see some more cool stuff going forward.
So, ranking the Spider Man films, all eight of them here, starting off right at the bottom, it's got to be Amazing Spider Man 2. That is a travesty of a movie. It is like 2.5 hours I want back from my life. Number seven is Spider Man 3. I think it was poorly executed with the multiple villains in this movie, unlike No Way Home, where I felt like they redeemed themselves when it came to that aspect. Number six would be Far From Home. This one was all right. I like Jake Gyllenhaal as Mysterio. Number five would be Amazing Spider-Man, the first Andrew Garfield movie, which was way better than obviously number two. Number four would be Homecoming. Really enjoyed that being the first Spider-Man into the MCU. And then for the top three, these ones would be interchangeable for number two and three, which is both one and two of the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man films, mainly because of nostalgia purpose. I also grew up watching Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, and like storyline wise, I think number two is better, but there's so many moments I think more of Spider-Man when it comes to the first one. And then at number one is No Way Home, not gonna lie, because you tie all three of those together. They did the whole multiverse aspect and adding the multiple superheroes that was well executed more than what they did with Spider-Man 3. I mentioned about Avengers OG being my favorite MCU movie. This is number two on my list of favorite MCU movies.
All right, ranking the Spider-Man movies. I feel like mine's going to be very similar to yours. At the bottom of the list, would be, yeah, the Amazing Spider-Man 2. And then honestly, maybe the first one after that. Even though that was a pretty good movie, I feel like I just like the other movies more. Then probably Spider-Man 3. I remember the hype around that movie when it came out was crazy. And then obviously it was not the best, also not the worst movie. I kind of enjoy it. And then, oh God.
Yeah, so basically you have the three Tom Holland movies left, if I'm not mistaken, and then
Yeah.
OG Spider-Man 1 and 2.
Yeah, so I guess this, yeah, it's got to be the second movie, Tom Holland movie, then the first one. This is really tough. I think I'm going to go Spider-Man 2, then No Way Home, and then Spider-Man 1, which is tough. But all three of those movies, like you said with yours, are so interchangeable. No Way Home was an incredible movie, honestly. I cried a lot watching that movie. It was awesome. So many emotions in that movie. It was great. But Spider-Man 1 is just a movie that I've watched so many times. But like you said, I do feel like Spider-Man 2 is almost the better movie, but Spider-Man 1 is just so iconic that it's hard not to put it at the top of the list.
All right, so the next franchise is Rocky, arguably the greatest sports franchise that has been done. So, Rocky 1 came out in 1976, Rocky 2 came out in 1979, Rocky 3 in 1982, Rocky 4 in 1985, Rocky 5 in 1990, and then Rocky Balboa in 2006. We are not including the trilogy of Creed movies that have released, although that is a part of the Rocky franchise. We're just strictly talking about just Rocky himself. Rocky is fantastic. Rocky set the tone for what a sports movie should be like. And I feel like a lot of motivational quotes that you hear nowadays came from the Rocky movies. It is a very inspirational movie series. This was probably the most trouble I had trying to rank these movies because, like, I was like, oh, do I put this at number one? Do I put this at the bottom?
Yeah, they are. It's definitely an awesome underdog story, which, like you said, should kind of be the way that most sports movies are. They are great. I mean, and like you said, so iconic, especially with the different sayings and motivational quotes that we've got from it, and obviously all the different like. I one thing that's huge with pop culture is like the Sylvester Stallone voice with Adrian, right? So it's definitely cool to have a set of movies where you can get so many awesome things to say to make pop culture references like that. And yeah, I do think it will be very tough to rank these ones as well. Obviously, it's almost the same as you said with Batman, where you kind of think of the villains. I'm just saying villains as in Rocky's opponents, I guess, in each of the movies. It really depends on how much you like those opponents.
All right, so for the Rocky films, ranking them right at number six is Rocky 5. And that's because I remember nothing about that, nothing whatsoever. And then recapping it, I'm like, there's a reason why it seems like I forgot about it, is because it was actually a lot of people's like list as the worst Rocky movie. They should have just realistically skipped on that and then go to what I ranked as number 5, which is Rocky Balboa. Then at number 4 is number 2. Then at number 3 is number 3. This one I remember for a lot of things, of course, Mr. T, and then right at the beginning of the movie, being a pro wrestling fan, Hulk Hogan is Thunder Lips. And then this is also the movie where Eye of the Tiger is in it. So, I mean, that's also a thing to remember about. Then this is where things got really difficult for me. The number 1 and number 2 spot, I put Rocky 4 at number 2 and Rocky 1 at number 1. It was difficult because I always enjoyed number 4. I loved the whole storyline, and it's so 80s esque of it's US versus Russia. Ivan Drago was just a machine. He wasn't even human. The man was a machine. He killed Apollo Creed in the beginning of the movie, and then Rocky would suffer brain damage after just barely making it out with Ivan Drago. But I put Rocky at number 1 is because the way that that was done had to set the tone of how this series was going to be. So much happened in that movie. Like, if the events that didn't happen in that first movie had happened, then like I don't even think there would be a franchise. So that's one of those things you got to think about. But I feel like it may be interchangeable with me with number 4 and number 1. But yeah, I gotta keep it number 1, the original being the best Rocky movie.
So I think if I had to rank them, it's 5 last, then 2, then 4. Though I do like Drago, but I don't know. Number 1 would be at number 2. And then number three, I think, is my favorite. I love Clubber Lang. I think he was wicked. And obviously with Hogan, that movie is just wicked. I really enjoy that one. And like you said, though, one is so high up because it really does set the tone of the movies and is also just such a great one.
Next one is a very popular franchise, definitely one we had to add on to, and that is Harry Potter. There was books, there were 7 of them, but then it became 8 movies. So starting off, number 1 is the Philosopher's Stone, or in the US, Sorcerer's Stone for some reason, released in 2001. Chamber of Secrets, released in 2002. Prisoner of Azkaban, released in 2004. Goblet of Fire, released in 2005. Order of the Phoenix, released in 2007. Half Blood Prince, released in 2008. And then we had the Deathly Hollows Part 1 and 2 released in 2010 and 2011, respectively. What a magical series. And I guess that is pun intended. Just a huge world of crazy, cool characters. I mean, the arc of Harry himself. But then this is also a series I like where not only do you care about the main characters, but you also like some of those side characters that don't get enough recognition. There's definitely a lot of plot twists, especially I watched the movies before having read the books. And I don't even remember if I've read all the books all the way through, but I know obviously I've watched all 8 of these movies. Even if you're not entirely the biggest fan, you got to respect how big this franchise has become, especially with like the Universal Studios Harry Potter thing that they have going on in Florida.
Yeah, Harry Potter is pretty awesome. And though I own all of the books and own all of the movies, I haven't read or seen all of them, which is crazy considering how long they've been out now at this point. The movies, I don't even know which ones I haven't seen, honestly. I definitely haven't seen like the last 2, which are part 1 and part 2, but I feel like I've only seen maybe the first 4, which is crazy. I definitely need to get onto watching them because I know that I really enjoy Harry Potter. So I don't know why I just haven't done it. So ranking them, this is going to be fun. I definitely know what my favorite one is, but I'm interested to hear what yours is.
All right, so ranking all 8 of these films, which I don't think MD will be ranking, but he'll rank as much as possible. So, right at number 8 is Half Blood Prince. That is, I feel like, a reason why they made Deathly Hollows a 2-part movie, because this was so much of a story that they crammed into the little time that they should have made into a 2-part movie because there's just so much more that they left out. Then at number 7 is Chamber of Secrets. At number 6 is Deathly Hallows Part 1. Number 5 is Philosopher's Stone. Number 4 is Deathly Hallows Part 2. I mean, it's the ending of the franchise. It closes everything. Number 3, which a lot of people do regard as the best movie, is Goblet of Fire. I think it's a little bit overrated. I get it with some of the scenes, and especially the whole thing is based off of the Triwizard Tournament. It's the debut of Lord Voldemort. And then number 2 and number 1, it's always interchangeable for me because I love both of these equally. So at number 2 is Order of the Phoenix. Number 1 is The Prisoner of Azkaban. There's so much that's amazing about Prisoner of Azkaban that I always mention, like, that's the best film, but people still don't understand why I say that.
So I'm not even going to try to rank them, considering I definitely need to finish watching all of them. I feel like it's not fair because of just how good they are to have not seen them to rank them. But I will say one thing that I hear a lot is people not loving the first movie. And I honestly think the first movie is pretty cool. And you understand what this world is through the first movie. So I don't really know why people hate on it too much, but I can understand because the series definitely does pick up at some point.
All right, and the last franchise we're going to be talking about in this podcast, and we had to save this one for last, it's Star Wars. It's easily the biggest franchise of all time. A New Hope, or originally just titled Star Wars, released in 1977. Empire Strikes Back, released in 1980. Return of the Jedi, released in 1983. Then we had to wait almost 20 years later for the prequels, with Phantom Menace releasing in 1999. Attack of the Clones, released in 2002. Revenge of the Sith, released in 2005, and then we have the sequel series Force Awakens in 2015, Last Jedi in 2017, and The Rise of Skywalker in 2019. We will not be including the side films like Solo in 2018, and there was also Rogue One in 2016, although I did really enjoy Rogue One, not so much of Solo. Star Wars, easily the biggest franchise in movie history, whether you like it or not. With the amount of money that's been made, and especially how this series has blossomed to not only just like kind of side films, but so many side projects. Like it starts off with the original trilogy, going into the prequels. Then you had TV series like Rebels and Clone Wars, especially. Then going to the sequels, which grew into the side series like Mandalorian and Ahsoka and Book of Boba Fett. All of this, it just blossomed like crazy, and it still continues to blossom with a bunch of different projects. And when it comes to the Funko Pops, of course, there's just so many of different characters that have been made. So Star Wars is a huge entity. They even have their own convention, Star Wars Celebration. They have the Galaxy's Edge at Disneyland. This is one that a lot of people may talk about as terms to ranking of the films because a lot of people have a lot of different opinions.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, I know that mine is definitely a lot skewed from what most people would rank the Star Wars films, but Star Wars is just so near and dear to me. I love Star Wars so much. It has always been one of my favorite movie series. Just so good. Like I said, it's so near and dear to me, and I collected a ton of Star Wars stuff over my life, which I've gotten rid of a lot of it, but at one point, Star Wars was basically like my whole entire life.
So when it comes to ranking of the films, and especially K-Dog and Fish, who was kind of inspiration to do this podcast topic, if they're listening, I wonder what they would think about this Star Wars ranking, especially with one of the films I know that they like that I would rank high, but I know for a fact that you may actually rank low. So starting off at number 9, Attack of the Clones, Episode 2. There's something about it where, especially rewatching it, I don't like. At number 8, it's The Last Jedi. Number 7 is The Rise of Skywalker. I felt it was all right, but it could have been better. I think the way that they ended it was a little bit weird. I'm still iffy on the idea of why they wanted to bring Palpatine all of a sudden back to life. Then number 6 would be Phantom Menace. Some people regard it as like the worst film. I don't think so. I think it's highly underrated. There's a lot of cool scenes like the pod racing scenes, and especially the what I always like to refer to, I guess in wrestling terms, the 2-on-1 handicap match lightsaber duel, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan against Darth Maul, is easily in my top 5, maybe even top 3 favorite lightsaber duels in the entire Star Wars franchise. So number 1 produced a lot of cool moments, and especially the look of like unfinished C-3PO was always a cool look in my opinion. Then at number 5 is The Force Awakens, indeed the best Disney sequel Star Wars film. I thought everything they did was pretty decent. Number 4 is number 4, which is A New Hope. And a lot of people would rank this super high, but looking at this film and then looking at the newer ones, like how slow paced this was. Then at number 3, for the longest time, it was my number 1 pick. It's Revenge of the Sith. Absolutely love this film. Obviously, this is the one we wanted to see for the prequels because the whole point of the prequels realistically was how Anakin became Darth Vader, and we got that answer in here. And for the most part, I thought they did a pretty decent job. There was some bugaboos. Overall, the movie was great. Then number 2 and number 1. So number 2, Return of the Jedi, and number 1 is Empire Strikes Back. And I go back to the whole thing I mentioned about Endgame and Infinity War for the same reason about Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. Empire Strikes Back had basically the plot twist of the bad guy going over. Return of the Jedi was just as equally great, but you knew that it was going to be a happy ending, and it was a great ending to where you probably could have ended off as a trilogy, but of course, it made so much money and people were requesting for more that they obviously had to make the prequels, which led to the sequels and all the Disney Plus and how big of a franchise it became afterwards. So, yeah, Empire Strikes Back at number 1, which I know K-Dog and Fish, if you guys are listening, would agree with that. But I know MD would rate that one very low, but I'm not sure how low that will be.
All right. So, yeah. So, ranking them at the bottom of the list, The Rise of Skywalker. There were some things in that movie I definitely didn't like you said, Palpatine and all that. I did like the movie. I don't think there's any that I actually like hate, but that one's got to come at the bottom. Then, Attack of the Clones. I mean, that movie is just so weird. It's so different than any of the Star Wars movies, too. But again, it's not a terrible movie, in my opinion. Then, I would say The Last Jedi, Force Awakens after that. I guess Revenge of the Sith next, even though that movie is super kick-ass. But I don't know. I feel like I just like the other movies more. Then A New Hope. That does pain me because I've seen A New Hope more than any of the Star Wars movies, I feel. But like you said, it is kind of just slow. I remember watching it for the first time in maybe I hadn't watched it in, let's say, like 7 years. And I was like, wow, this is real slow, obviously. And when you know exactly what's going to happen, you're not exactly captivated by it when you watched it so many times. Then I'm going to go go The Empire Strikes Back, which I know is a hot take to rank it not as high up on my list because it is a great movie. The Phantom Menace at number 2. I love The Phantom Menace. I feel like it gets so much hate. I think Jar Jar is a good character. I don't know why people hate him so much. He's a comedy relief, which is really, really cool. Like you said, with C3PO unfinished, that is an awesome look for C3PO. I love that look on C3PO. And then my favorite Star Wars movie being Return of the Jedi. I've thought this my entire life. Was so captivated by Return of the Jedi with Jabba's palace. I love Jabba's palace so much. I wish there was like a real life Jabba's palace that I can go to. I'm sure there probably is somewhere, but that would be so cool. And then, of course, with Endor with the Ewoks, I loved that so much. And the final moments with Darth Vader, where he gets to see Luke with his own eyes for the first time, it's just so good. I don't know. I just love that movie so much. So that is easily my number one favorite Star Wars movie.
I'm surprised you ranked Empire Strikes Back at number 3 because I thought it was going to be much lower, like bottom half. I remember discussing like rankings maybe years ago, and you ranked Empire like super low. So a little bit surprising you put it at the top 3 portion there.
Yeah, I mean, things definitely change, and I've really come around to like Empire more than I used to when I was a kid. Something just changed because I understand now, I guess, like how good Empire is.
All right, so that is going to be the end of this edition of a Funko Podcast. If you enjoyed this special greatest movie franchises of all time edition, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you for listening to this edition of a Funko Podcast, and we hope to see you guys on another video on the channel. 1, 2, 3, I'm out of here.
Peace in, peace out.